Hey everyone, welcome. Pastor Patrick Walker. I want to pick up on one verse at the end of chapter 10 and then look at chapter 11 again in Genesis 10:25. Two of the sons born to Eber, one was named Peleg, because in his time the earth was divided. Now, Peleg was born about 100 years after the flood. He lived, we know in scripture, because if we turn to chapter 11, Peleg is listed in verse 16. It says his father had him when he was 34. His father lived to be 430, but Peleg only lived to be 239. So something happened during the course of Peleg's life, about 100 years after the flood, that every person after him lived half as long. So every person before him lived to be in the 400s. Do you remember before the flood, everybody lived to be 900 or so. After the flood, that lifespan was cut in half. And everybody born within 100 years after the flood lived into the 400s. Well, something happened during the lifespan of Peleg where he only lived to be 239. And no one lives longer than 250 years after him. So the lifespan again is cut in half. And it says that the earth was divided in his time. And I think this refers to two different things. First of all, it is possible, now this corresponds exactly with the time of Nimrod, that if Nimrod was building the Tower of Babel and God came down, this was not all three of the tribes of the sons of Noah. This was basically, Nimrod was the grandson of Ham. So Shem, Ham, Japheth. So, and Peleg is the great-great-grandson of Shem. Okay? So, during Peleg's lifetime, I believe that the Tower of Babel was destroyed and the earth was divided in the sense that the one language that everyone spoke was broken up and now there were multiple languages. That is one theory, which I think is very reasonable. But the other theory is we know historically that there were major ice caps all around the world. There was an ice age, and ice covered much more of the landmass than it does today. We know that. And the thought was that in Peleg's time, about 200 years, now he was born 100 years after the flood, but he lived to be 239. So maybe 200 years after the flood, during his lifespan, not only do you have the Tower of Babel, where people began to spread out over the earth, because that was the whole point. Come together, build a tower. We're not going to listen to God. We're going to disobey him. We're not going to spread out. God comes down, wrecks the tower, confuses the languages. Everybody's forced to spread out. As they are spread out, they follow the animal herds. And you know the land bridge on the Bering Strait that goes from Russia all the way to North America, that's how they believe the first individuals came to North America and then down to South America. I believe that was about 200 years after the flood, following woolly mammoth, following the animal herds, after the Tower of Babel. And I think it was during Peleg's lifespan, during his time, maybe 300 years after the flood now, that the polar ice caps began to melt, and perhaps that Bering Strait, which was a land bridge of ice at that time, began to melt, and the earth was divided in the sense that those who had walked to Australia, or those who had, I don't know, some of the other islands, those who had walked to North and South America could no longer get back because the water level rose, okay? And it created islands like Australia or down into the Philippines. And also water rose, the ice caps, and the land bridge to North America was severed. So I think that happened in Peleg's lifespan about 300 years after the flood. So I think that was worth mentioning as well. And I will say this. My previous devotional was on Nimrod. What are we at? 5 minutes. Previous devotional was on Nimrod. According to Jewish tradition, Abram's father, Terah, was Nimrod's head general. Very favored, very successful. There was a prophecy. There was a star that swallowed up 4 other stars. The wise men of Nimrod's court said, there's a baby that's born that is going to be great. The generations that come from him are going to spread out around the world. He's a mighty man. Nimrod felt threatened. They found out through divination who this would be, and they recognized it was Terah's son, Abram. So Nimrod says, give me your son. I'll give you lots of gold and silver, but we got to kill him. And Terah hesitates because he doesn't want to kill Abram. So what he does is he switches the baby out with one of his other children, with one of his concubines, and he gives it to Nimrod. Nimrod doesn't know, kills the baby. And Terah secretly sends the nurse, and he might have sent the mother too, this is Jewish tradition, off to live in a cave secretly, kept them separate for a number of years. And then from there, he sent them to go and live with Noah and Shem. Now, I showed you this in the last one. I'll put this up again. This is the longevity chart of people from the time of Adam to the time of Joseph. So you can see on this chart, I can see very clearly that Shem actually outlived Abraham. Shem was living at the time of Abraham and outlived him, because Shem lived to be 600 years. He lived 500 years after the flood. Abraham was born, I can't add this up, about 250 years after the flood, and lived to be 175. So Shem lived long enough to know not only Abraham, Isaac, but also Jacob. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So think about this. Adam lived to be 900 and something. He could have passed on everything he knew to Methuselah, who could have passed on everything he knew to Noah, who could have passed on everything he knew to Shem, and Shem passes it on to Jacob, and Jacob passes it on to Joseph, and Joseph to Moses. So you can span the first 2,500 years of human history in like 5 generations. 5 godly men pass it on, boom, 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 all the way, and it gets to Noah, and it's only been 5 generations, which is not a big, leap. That's not a big gap. That you're just giving them paperwork. You're passing down the stories, and what had happened before the flood passed down. And so Moses is the one that kind of writes it all down. But much of this stuff, of course, has been lost. We don't know. It hasn't been recorded us in the Bible. But Nimrod thinks he's safe. He's good because he's killed this child. There's no threat to his reign. Meanwhile, Abraham lives in a cave, then is sent to live with Noah and Shem, who are still alive and outlive Abraham, and they invest him and they train him for 40 years. So when God appears to Abram in Genesis 12, which is the next chapter, the Lord said to him, how did Abraham hear the Lord's voice? Well, this explains it. If Abraham had been trained in the house of Noah and Shem to know the Lord, to fear the Lord, you see what I'm saying? Then it's an easy jump to, now the Lord begins to speak to him. Abram, I've selected you for new purpose. Go. You're the godly line. So from Noah to Shem, basically jumping, skipping all the other generations in between, goes to Abram, and so on. Okay? So that's how Abram knew the voice of the Lord, follows the Lord, and I think that's a reasonable explanation in chapter 12, which we haven't gotten to yet. And this, of course, happens when Abram is 75 years of age. Now, the other thing I will say real quick is Abram married his niece. Abram married the sister of his older brother. And I think his older brother was like 30 years older than him. So he married the daughter of his older brother. Married the daughter of his older brother, Sarai. and they were wed. And I think Sarai was 10 years younger than Abram. I've got to look at the dates here because it's all blending together. But it's very fascinating. I mean, don't just glance over so-and-so begot so-and-so begot so-and-so. I'm thinking time frames. I'm looking at the years. I'm adding up things in the column. This is wonderful. Let's study the Bible together. Again, Genesis chapter 10 and 11. Look back through those, read those chapters, and consider this message. Until next time, God bless.